last lecture in this series about incremental and fundamental innovation is just to give you insight into what, unfortunately, most innovation processes do, which is this linear fundamental model or a funnel model where you put a lot of ideas on one end and then somehow the system just works on them and an idea pops out the other end. And the elements of iteration and that you have to fold in market implementation and technology from the beginning are not considered, and of course that's why innovation in the last decades has become very inefficient. So again, as amazing as this is, we are all organized to do generally a linear innovation model, and the reason is that incremental innovation appears linear. Now, to understand that, I think from the incremental innovation lecture, you can see that we're only changing one thing. Let's say I change the technology slightly to release a new product, but the market application and the implementation are the same. Then what do I really see happening over the year or two while I do that? I invest capital, I have a plan that's on a Gantt chart, and everything follows in a linear fashion. And at the far end, the beginning end, it looks like I've introduced a new concept that probably introduces some uncertainty, and then those uncertainties kind of get removed in some sort of linear fashion, even though I've only introduced like probably one or two uncertainties or something. So incremental innovation, in other words, is like a lot of other activities in life where over short periods of time they appear very linear. But actually, most things in the world, if you look at them over a long enough period, are not linear at all. I mean, you can understand this mathematically if you're into it, because any curve, any exponential curve, if you were to zoom in at particular points where there's deviation and you can't quite tell that it's exponential. I mean, if it's true exponential curve, it's exponential everywhere. But there's deviations for some reason, and it looks like when you're on some part of the curve, you're deviating and it's linear. But actually, if you zoom back out, you'll see overall, there's a power law or some other curve associated with it. So it's kind of like that, where you're kind of zoomed in and you're not really seeing all these nonlinear factors. So that's a very high level view of it, but maybe an easier way to look at it is the second reason that we have this model is that when we have organizations dedicated to executing on linear things, so for example, the company has been selling things into the marketplace for innovation from the past that was done a long time ago. So you're at the very, very end of the innovation process and you're not innovating anymore, but you're just selling the same thing. And those organizations are highly specialized, and people in those roles are expected to do very specialized things, and they're not expected to have uncertainty introduced into all of their tasks. It's the nature of a large organization, right? So what happens is when an organization gets large is that the tendency is to remove uncertainty from everyone's tasks. And there is a very powerful thing, of course, is that then you can really execute on the end of an innovation, bring it to the marketplace and churn it out over and over again and create great economic growth from the earlier processes of innovation. Those organizational forces, though, do tend to, like I said, remove those uncertainties, and then we then say, fine, you guys are responsible for production. The people before you are responsible for development, and the people before you are responsible for research. So in this kind of specialized world, we organize ourselves, we break all of the steps down into a linear process. In such organization, iteration is impossible because you have created on purpose a linear handoff of all these specialists. However, from an organization point of view, that's much easier. think about what we're talking about here is we have to organize where people can interact with market application and implementation, even though they're doing research. In a current organization, that's an HR person's, a human resource person's nightmare, right? So it's pretty obvious that if we want to create innovative organizations, we have a lot to do on the organizational side. And we have to come up with a balance between part of the organization that needs to crank out stuff for profit from previous innovations, and then part of the organization has to have some sort of new organization that has less specialty in every job. So anyway, these gigantic organizations tend to linearize and want to have this funnel model where R&D guys are supposed to worry about things further out and hand it off to development guys who are supposed to hand it off to production guys. So if you think about that model, it's also the way universities are organized. So whether it's R&D, I mean, there are not really that many further out R&D organizations and corporations anyway, but today, universities are supposed to be doing the far out stuff, and somehow they're supposed to kind of whittle away at this technology, polishing something down, and then when it starts to look somewhat reduced in size, then we try to shove it through some sort of implementation scheme, which is already reduced because it turns out that the way that we were working on the technology in a vacuum without really seeing what was going on in the implementation market, we kind of forced to accept a smaller set of implementation, and then we try to stuff it into the original reason we were doing the research that let's say that I had picked a long time ago when I started the research project. So of course you could see now why this is very difficult and low probability, because unless you fold constantly in the implementation of market, this isn't going to result in the probability for converging on a purple dot and a green dot fitting into a red dot is much smaller than if all those forces are constantly acting on each other over a long period of time. So despite this, we still today expect the following model to work, which is, say, we have university here, and then we sort of have customers and businesses out here, and somehow after doing all this fundamental work on technology and narrowing this down to a few key pieces, we're supposed to be able to jump across at the last minute and get into this marketplace. So clearly we have to figure out, and there are some places like MIT where, because of individual professors doing the innovation process, the iterative innovation process, the implementation and the market forces are information and influences that come in, even though they're not forced, because the advantage of the university is you're not forced to work on short-term needs. And so by seeing short and long-term needs and changes in implementation and market over time, what it allows you to do is to figure out what key pieces of work are worth doing, and your chances of having impact are higher. And so this linear model is completely inefficient, and one of the reasons why we're entering a time period where no fundamental innovations are appearing in the marketplace right now. Now, you could ask, how do people in such a situation figure out what to do over here? And the answer is, well, you get together with other people that are doing the same thing, and then you create your own little metric, whatever it may be, that's interesting in quotes, or curiosity in quotes. And you decide as a community, and that leaves, when the university comes to look at promotions and things like that, it leaves the impression that, wow, their peers are really saying they're successful and everything. And unfortunately, these loops of non-reality are kind of producing a lot of research that doesn't have that much of a chance of an impact. So we have to, in general, and all universities try to figure out how to bring these forces in without distorting the environment so that everybody has to, uh, you know, do short-term uh, activity that actually can be handled quite easily by the rest of the marketplace.